The zombies are consumerism. Oh,
This is where you tell me you've actually had it on this whole time.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are finally back. We're going to be talking about some zombie movies today, as you might have guessed by the pre-recorded preamble that played just before this part started speaking. And before I say hello, Matt, I'd just like to say that this episode is up a bit later than I would have liked it to be, because the taping was later than I'd like it to be, because I caught a fun virus myself. Unfortunately, it didn't do fun things like make me the undead. It just made me feel like the undead by giving me dysentery. But we're finally through that now, so hi Matt, how are you?
Hello. I don't have dysentery, so I think I just have to say yes, I'm doing quite well.
That's good. That's good. Yes, the films we did are Dawn of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead. And the reason I did these is because it is October, which is the month of spooky spooks, because Samhain, aka All's Hallowed Eve, aka Halloween, is on October 31st. I've chosen this because zombies are, in these films, a signifier of consumerism, and it's consumerism that is the easiest lens with which, as an Australian, to look at Halloween, because any of the European cultures that had any sort of autumn equinox festival commemorating and honouring the dead or acknowledging a time of spiritual awareness didn't come to Australia in the right generations. So the average Australian's experience with Halloween is entirely as an imported product, predominantly from America through advertising. And this is why a lot of Australians tend to respond very fiercely negatively towards Halloween, as it's been this thing that has really only become generally accepted by younger generations in the last 5 years or so, through decades of marketing predominantly by food manufacturers, knowing that as soon as it's accepted in a thing, they'll be making so much more money off of their chocolate sales than they've lost in all these failed marketing campaigns. Which is a thing that's a bit shitty. And my general stance on this after years of being frustrated by this, as I tend to be grouchy about holidays in general due to the commercial aspects of them. But Halloween, I feel that the take you gotta take as an Australian now is that it's here, it's been accepted now, it's brute forced its way in. So you might as well find ways to actually get something positive out of its presence. And Halloween, with its spooky spooks, and the American style of Halloween with the goofy costumes and the trick-or-treating and so on, is quite often an event that becomes a safe space for minorities, as societies which view them as essentially being monstrous already, then have this one day where being monstrous is considered an okay thing that you can have a giggle about. And so this is a place where people often feel like they can belong for a bit. And so using that sort of approach can make this... You might as well make this a day where you're thinking a bit about minorities and how to accept them better, so they don't have to use a bullshit commercial sell a bunch of M&M's day as their way of feeling accepted. They could just be accepted every day. That's a goal to strive towards. What are your feelings on Halloween, Matt?
Wow. Well, actually, just thinking of what you were saying there, my mind is going to like all those stories where you have some kind of monster or some kind of, this is like a literal sense, like a fictionalized monster, or like mutants in Marvel or something like that. Like whenever you have like people who don't fit a mold in a very excuse me, in a science fiction or fantastical kind of way, that's always how they do Halloween, where it's like, oh, this is my one day where I can fit in because I'll just look like everyone else. That's all I could think of when you were saying a much more realistic depiction.
And yeah, there are a lot of places in America where if someone is found out to be a transsexual, then they actually will have a mob try and shoot them.
which is very sad. Uh, and yeah, I guess I feel like my feelings towards Halloween is just like I've always been a bit unsure about where as because obviously we get American kind of in movies that Halloween is a thing, but then in like your reality, your day to day life, you don't really see anything. So it's always been like a source of confusion to me of like how should I feel about this? Should I feel excited for Halloween? Should I want to go trick or treating? Should I be thinking about like some more occult kind of thing? Should I be feeling like that? It's always kind of been a source of confusion, I guess.
Yeah, like it's an entirely in Australia. It is an entirely, very clearly constructed event in the way that you don't have. And while I could say that yes, all events are constructions, a lot of them have enough normative and traditional precedent that they seem like they're a natural thing. Whereas Halloween is very obviously to an Australian a false constructed event.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like a kernel of like tradition or spirituality, like in most holidays. But yeah, in
Oh, we'll be
Australia,
talking about Christmas as we get closer to Christmas.
but yeah, you're right. In Australia, it does. There's like an otherness to it. Like it's just something that's just not really a part of our culture, but it's still kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's an awkward holiday is what how I describe it.
Yeah, a bit awkward is a good way of putting it. And I'm going to move from here to another point on zombies are consumerism before we actually get to Dawns of the Dead. Because there is something I'm really excited to talk about briefly, and this is my opportunity to take this, which is a Japanese animated series this season about zombies. Idle zombies. Which is making Matt probably want to die right now. I can't see his face as we're doing this one online, unfortunately. But
I thought we were safe. I thought we were safe from the anime, but apparently
no, you're never safe. The reason I'm excited here is this show is made by a bunch of yes men and nobodies. And so I see Pop Idol zombie show made by a Toei yes man who did some time directing like 100 episodes of One Piece, which basically means he was there to make the trains run on time, as you don't really need to make any artistic input. Everything's already laid out before you. And a writer who's just done like 4 episodes for random shows. And then they've made this show where they really actually get all the semiotic value there is to having pop idols as their zombies, where you have zombies as just like the destructive dehumanization of consumerism combined with the pop idol industry, which is in turn all about dehumanizing the women who it recruits and cajoles into working in this industry. So, like, it has the producer of the group doing things like rebranding all of their names in a way to be more marketable, and then on top of that, once he's done this, then actually taking away their names entirely and just assigning them numbers. He continually talks to them in the way that an abuser would, and uses the excuse of certain zombie trope trappings to justify keeping them locked up in a cage, essentially. And it's touching on all these things. It's 2 episodes in, and it's a comedy, so we don't know how far it's gonna take things and where the pins are going to drop. But this show really feels like it's really gonna start going for the jugular down the road, and that's really neat. Also, the second episode had this really, really good rap scene where they spit some hot bars. It was great.
that like the last that I heard from you was basically you took basically basically the start of the zombie idol talk.
Well, Matt, you'll just have to listen to the final product to hear the rest of me talking about it, okay? I'm not going to put you through it again for a second take. You are lucky. Yes, for those of you who listen to my voice for fighting game commentary, this is why I'm not doing any net play tournaments at the moment. My net has gotten worse. So then, now that all the anime's out of the way, Dawns of the Dead. zombie movies. Now, I believe that you, Matt, watched them in the order that I was originally going to do when we were going to do this together, which was the George Romero 1978 film first, and the Zack Snyder 2004 film second. Is that what you did?
That is what I did.
Cool. I did the opposite.
Ah,
Tricky this week. I did it that way
the mix-up.
because I was still regaining the ability to remain lucid for more than, 2 hours at a time, and wanted to actually get some work done, so I watched Dawn of the Dead by Zack Snyder via Netflix on a Wii U tablet in bed at about 2 in the morning.
I had no idea it was on Netflix.
Neither did I until I fired it up and discovered it was there.
The things we do for you on this podcast. Adam was sick, he was dying, and yet he watched Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead for all of you.
And so, George Romero's is a classic, and Zack Snyder's film is a film which opens with a clear-cut protagonist who, over the course of the film, has an arc and develops from a person who is fearful into a woman of action. Likewise, there is a man called CJ who begins this film as an arsehole and ends the film self-sacrificing. It has a conventional Hollywood 3-act structure, a conventional Hollywood score, a Hollywood writer on board, some high-quality visual effects. It is a film that somewhat understands brevity. It doesn't waste hours upon hours of your time. Are you there, Matt? Can you hear me? Oh no. Have we conked out again?
It's okay, you're back. I think what I'll do, just because if every time I think you're calling out, I go, oh no, then I'll ruin what you'll say. I guess if I just don't hear anything from you for 5 seconds, I'll type something down.
Yep. Yes, typing seems good. Alright,
Yeah.
So I'm getting to, it's got all these conventional movie things that Matt seems to complain in the movies that I throw at him aren't there and he doesn't like. So, you don't like this movie, do you, Matt?
I hate it. I hate
Why do you hate
everything
this
about
movie
it.
is what I'm getting to here. On paper, this film should be a movie you like.
Oh, I don't know. I never heard. What's interesting? Sorry, I'll get to your question. What's interesting to me about these movies is that they kind of I kind of watched these before I really read reviews or watched things on YouTube or any other website for either video essays or anything like that.
Before you had encountered any sort of film discourse, be it actual film theory or just criticism in general.
Yeah, which is a blessing and a curse. This isn't a bad thing or a good thing. It's just interesting that this is it means I don't have the same tools that I might have now to discuss and to think about the movies I watch. But it also means that what's so interesting to me about these movies is that for me, my opinions on them have been they're pure, if that makes sense. No one has talked to me about these films. They're just films that I have watched, and I never really talked too much about them to other people, or I never seen reviews from them. So it's just a completely me opinion on them, which I think means that they'll probably be pretty naive, maybe, because that's kind of what happens when you just have one viewpoint and it's your own. You don't really throw it out there. So that's why this is kind of exciting for me to talk about them, because I don't know, I might learn some interesting things.
Popping the cherry of your film opinions.
Something like that. It's difficult to talk why I hate Dawn of the Dead, because so much of it comes from the fact that I love the original so much, and I feel like there's so much in the original that is pretty really, really good. And
would you be able to boil down your problems with Snyder 2004 in one word?
Simplistic.
I will accept simplistic. Sure. My one-word description for my problems with Zack Snyder 2004 Dawn of the Dead is politics. The worldview of these two films is very different. George Romero's is a very critical film, and Zack Snyder's is utterly uncritical. It's, in some ways, the way that I was alluding to earlier, I actually think in some ways this is the textbook perfect popcorn zombie movie. In that you got a bunch of people, there's a bunch of zombies, the people have guns, they use the guns to shoot at the zombies, and there's this edgy nihilistic ending. And in doing so, the way it frames this violence and the people it characterizes along the way makes this the perfect film for the sort of person who gleefully imagines, yeah man, if I were in a zombie apocalypse, I'd be like the king, man. I'd have like all the best setups, I'd know how to shoot them in the head, I'd always double tap, I'd always make sure I'm safe, I'm fit and I'm strong so they'd never catch me. And the film... Here's one of the beautiful things about this film is there's this complete fucking arsehole called CJ, who's a mall security guard, who begins the film being this complete arsehole. He gets locked in a cell for a while by the less arseholey people, and I described him initially as someone who goes from being a jerk to self-sacrificing. I don't actually think that's his arc. I don't think he has an arc. I think he's the same man the whole way through, and he just thinks that blowing up a tank of propane at the end would be awesome. What I think happens is everyone else in that film becomes more like CJ.
Yeah. Wow, this is definitely a very... Like, for me, I didn't even see arcs in general for any of these people. Or, like, to me, this is such a basic, simple film. It can't even get even, like, basic things right to me. Like, I guess probably because that's coming from the original, where it feels like there's so many interesting themes and there's so much character development in the original, where maybe you are right. There are some arcs being made here, like the main character lady, who I do not know the name of. I guess she does become stronger throughout it. And
Anna. Her name is Anna.
Thank you, Anna. And
I had to write it down when they said it a couple of times so I would remember it.
Yeah, they're not the most memorable of characters. And Ving Rhames'
CJ's
character...
memorable. CJ and Steve are such pricks that I remember their names. They elicit enough emotion from me.
Well, it's... Yeah. I don't think this movie kind of has the ability to really take us through any kind of interesting character arcs, because it's not a movie that cares for them at all. Like, when I say this movie is simplistic, you say uncritical, like, it kind of comes down to the same thing, right? That it's a movie that doesn't think. Mm-hmm. There's no thought process in this film. It's taking the most surface level value things from zombie films and just putting them in there. It doesn't think about them at all. It's almost like a frat boy doing a zombie film, but they have like they clearly have like this enough skill to be able to make the film, but they don't have any
by and for the sort of NRA nut who wants to feel like their dick is big because they've got guns.
Yeah, it's funny because you said like the idea that it's kind of like has that prototypical perfect zombie movie. I wonder if this is what it's like to enjoy slasher films, but to know that most slasher films are terrible. In that I'm a pretty big fan of zombies, but I understand that most of them are quite terrible. And, you know, what you described there as the perfect zombie film is obviously a not very good film.
A film that you hate.
Yes.
You know that I said perfect popcorn zombie film rather than perfect zombie
that's
film.
True. That is true.
The George Romero's first 3 zombie films are absolutely, to me, the pinnacle. But I guess for anyone who hasn't seen either film entitled Dawn of the Dead, we should just lay out the plot. There's a zombie outbreak. If you get bitten by the living dead, then you become the living dead. Some people escaping from the living dead hole up in a shopping mall. They then decide to leave the shopping mall.
Well, actually, no, sorry. Because this is something that it's probably not as important as I used to think it is. This is something that, as I said, in my own naive world, like, look at these movies. Something that always really annoyed me. Now that I think about it, it's probably like not as big of an issue either way. But like, it really did annoy me how in Dawn of the Dead they actually don't decide to leave; they're kind of forced to, and that to me is pretty important. While in the remake, they do decide to leave themselves, and it annoys the hell out of me because I feel like it's in the original film when they are stuck in that mole for such a long period of time. And God, I guess I might as well just go straight to it. This is like me jumping around probably too much, but you've mentioned it, so now I really have to get out there. They are stuck in that mole for so long that it kind of robs them of the kind of togetherness and the unity that they had at the start of the film when they're all working together. This is in the original. And then as the movie goes on and they're stuck in this mole full of like all the materialistic desires they could use, they could want, they kind of lose themselves. They kind of lose their motivation. They lose their they just lose who they are. And in the end, the reason why one of them ends up dying is because he is so attached to this mole. He's so attached to all these desires. He ends up getting so mad at these looters that come in and kind of ruin everything for him. He starts firing back at them, starts like getting into a violent encounter. He doesn't have to.
Yes, and this is so on the nail for one of the points I was going to make about
Sure.
how George Romero's film discusses and uses zombies to criticize consumerism. There is a quote that I wrote down by the woman whose name I've forgotten, unfortunately.
Is this Diane from the...
Yes, Diane.
the
Diane
original?
from the original.
Yeah.
At one point, because she's the one who's the most against this fixation that everyone has on the utility and the value of the shopping mall and the sense of power that it gives in being able to possess things. She at one point describes it as, it's so bright and neatly wrapped that you don't see it's a prison.
Yeah. It's such a good line. It's funny because the original Dawn of the Dead is not exactly high art, but it looks high art compared to the remake. Because like Dawn of the Dead I understand how simplistic it is to make your things about consumerism and use zombies as kind of like that symbolism for it. Like I get that it's very
Linda Cut having some audio of some advertisements advertising products while you see zombies clawing at the windows.
Oh yeah.
Do you get it?
Like it's not. It's
great.
It's pretty simplistic, but like
it works. That's what makes it so good.
And it's something. It's something to hold on to. Something else that is more than just the basic notes of a zombie film, which are also done better in the original anyway. But like it's something to hold on to. While in the remake, there's literally no reason for them to leave. They're not unhappy because, and this is another thing that we'll get to either now or later, there's just way too many characters in the remake because they need people to die. So that isolation, basically one of the reasons why they're so unhappy in the original is that...
Ennui.
Yeah, exactly. And like the fact that they are just so isolated and that even though they have all the material desires, they just don't have anyone to talk to. Yep. And the world is gone. There's like where humans in general are such social creatures. We enjoy, usually, most of us, talking to people, making friends, relationships, being in that kind of environment. And that's taken from them. And the material wealth around them does not at all help them.
Yeah. There's no self-actualization possible. They've achieved the security, but what they need to truly be people and be who they are isn't available to them.
Yeah, there's some... I guess there's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs there, probably. Like the lower end is okay, but the stuff that, or is it the basic stuff?
Self-actualization is the final is the peak of Maslow's pyramid.
Yeah, and they're not getting that. But with the remake, and this is because, I mean, the reason the remake doesn't do this is because the remake is fucking dumb and it doesn't even think about this.
Okay, let me say why the remake's not doing it. It's because in screenplay terms, they want to make something which is distinct from the previous film, and so they construct a third act, which is all about, well, we need to get somewhere and achieve a goal. It's then, okay, so it assumes that there's no actual satisfactory endpoint, so therefore, We'll use the supermarket as a means to construct a vehicle in order to move to a bigger climax. So, like, it works in terms of bog standard Hollywood structuring, but leads to a way less thematically interesting film. And I'm going to touch on a bit more on something here for a bit about the Zack Snyder film, which is the film opens with a woman basically missing all the early stages. She's coming off shift from the hospital as the first victims of the zombies are coming in. She's in the shower when the news report happens to hit. And so suddenly in the morning, her daughter's become a zombie. Her daughter then kills her husband. And so she's forced to very rapidly escape from both her husband and her child and drive away from everything that she knows, leaving some very nicely framed empty suburbia that slowly starts to fill up with the panic of as people's lives and their sense of security has been impaled. Which is neat, and these first couple of scenes are pretty good, but where things die, there is an exact moment where Dawn of the Dead by Zack Snyder stops giving a fuck. And that is as the camera moves towards Anna's bedroom to reveal that her daughter has become a zombie. Halfway through the camera moving forward, the film has been very quiet up to this point, and you feel like, okay, it's gonna build and build. There was like this very quiet shot of her driving through this empty suburbia, which is a state of normalcy at that point. And it's halfway through this slow cameraman walking towards the door that the orchestra kicks in. All the horns and all the strings all at once. You go from complete silence to the visual being the same as it was when silent, but now the music's just going BAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAA
Yeah, there's like I wanted to talk about both the beginnings of these films and also the music of the films. In that both the original does both better. uh, I, it's interesting to me that when I was writing the notes for the original, which was obviously the one I did first. What's interesting to me is that, and I knew this even as I was writing them, I knew that as I was writing the notes for the original, that half of my notes for the remake was already done. Because so much of the positives that you see in the original, you can flip them almost in the remake. You can say, as
Yes,
in like,
and I've got the proof for that, Matt, because having watched the remake first, a lot of my notes are, here's the issues with this film, and we'll see how they are resolved by this film made 20 years earlier. And they were.
I first, I love the beginning of the original so much. I
It achieves what films like Godzilla were trying to do for you, I think.
Yeah, that's probably that. Yeah, expand on that there.
Oh, yeah, it begins without really establishing any particular person to be focusing on, but instead the general mood and starting to give a holistic vision of a nation that's entering panic as a national
Oh yeah,
disaster is kicking in. You're just seeing a TV production crew just in chaos as they're trying to get shit done before they're cut off and replaced by the emergency broadcast. It then cuts to, I believe there's some panic shots of panic people before it then moves into, like, the most gloriously heavy-handed moment of the film, even heavier-handed than the consumerism aspects, is, okay, there's this zombie outbreak. The government needs to send in some armed intervention. And as soon as they're given the okay, just every racist arsehole has been enabled by the Nixon administration. And at this point, it's just the Nixon administration. You think now, it would be so much easier because there's been decades more of systemic racism supporting these sorts of people. Just the second they've been given guns and given carte blanche to shoot the zombies, they just go into apartment buildings in poorer areas, find every single person of color they can, and shoot them in the head.
yeah. It's so good. Like it's
Like,
both
you
those two
see,
opening
like,
scenes are so good.
10 people of color civilians die before a single zombie dies in this film.
Yeah, and in some way, and like that, it also establishes another big theme of the movie, and that's just like how humanity is the cause of its own demise.
Yes.
Like the zombies aren't, and they even say this like throughout. There's a lot of news broadcasts. There's like especially the black the eye patch wearing doctor who's so amazing. Often, like, and to hear them as a few.
Mr. Break them on the wheel of logic himself.
He's great, but it's not just him. There's a few experts I think throughout the movie. They're basically like, look, like we could have solved this problem, but we can't because of our own problems, which I'm sorry, we're jumping around so much, but it's like there's so many good things in the original and so many bad things about the remake that like it's hard not to.
That's
like,
part of the beauty of like zombies as consumerism is like the zombies are so laughably slow and incompetent, and yet they win.
Yeah.
And with the things they're signifying, how scary is that to think of? That we have the warning signs, we know the issues with a capital-driven system. We know the issues of a consumption-driven system with improper distribution. We know it's there. We know how to shoot it in the head, but we've still let it destroy the country.
Yeah. And I guess there's obviously so much more to talk about. You could almost sum up the difference between the original and the remake right here in that the original is like, it's not about the fact that these zombies are realistic threats. It's what they symbolize to us. It's what they symbolize. It's the theme that they create. While in the remake, that's fucking dumb. How can these slow zombies be a threat to anyone? So its answer is to make them super fast.
Yeah, man. Have you seen 28 Days Later? That's right. Why are zombies so slow normally? That's a plot hole, ding.
Yeah. Like, it's like right there. You see the different priorities in both of these films. And another thing that this is
it's not zombies are a thing that can actually say things about our modern life. It's, wouldn't it be awesome if we shot them in slow-mo?
And this is what I mean when I like simple and dumb and. But
and what's even better is that the George Romero film is riffing on this attitude.
Yeah.
There's a scene where it shows a bunch of redneck arseholes gleefully chugging their beers. The cinematography uses lots of extreme close-ups, and the editing is rapid fire like an advertisement. So it briefly turns into this advertisement for redneck shooting range, and then you see like their life's meaningless and the zombies are still gonna get them.
Well, actually, like one of the things that I do like about that scene, and also the scene where you see the looters, like just the looters in general, as well as just the fact that they the two characters, Peter and Diane, end up escaping at the end of the movie, and that's kind of how it ends. Well, it ends with the famous gonk music as zombies are going through the mall, but for our main characters, it ends with them flying off into the sunset. Is that while it does such a great job of showing like this is how these zombies will destroy us because of our own issues, we'll cause our own demise, but it also doesn't feel the need to be so depressing and so just sad and stuff like that, to not have any hope at all. In that, instead of saying, oh, it's all over, it's all destroyed, it's kind of just saying, look, we can survive. These people in the countryside are still doing okay. These looters are surviving. Peter and Diane are fine. But whether we do or not is going to be down to us, not the zombies. It's down to what
thinking about ourselves.
Yeah. While with Dawn of the Dead, it's like, fuck that shit. Like, no. They try and escape and they all die because the zombies kill them. Everything is the zombies.
You know,
the zombies are a physical
awesome,
threat.
But then, like, you know, man, like, life's actually, you know, meaningless. And so, like, you'll shoot a bunch, but you eat, you breed, you repeat, then you're dead. You know, man, like, life's a bitch, then you die. Ooh, wah! Crank that Disturbed, man.
It's one is just so good and one is so fucking shit.
Like this film. This is really early into Zack Snyder's career, and it's funny you were bringing up the length thing because this is one of the shortest films Zack Snyder's ever made. It's only it's under 2 hours from memory. Or
it is
just over. Anyway,
no, I'm pretty sure it is shorter. I can't remember
like,
seeing
it is absolutely shorter than Romero's, but I think it's even under 2 hours.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
Like, I have some theories as to why that's the case, but this is one of those rare cases where that that shortness and that brevity is absolutely to its detriment, because that slow burn feeling of ennui, as well as the tension of the process of seeing people securing the mole that you get in Romero's, is gone. And on top of that, as you mentioned earlier, there's like triple the cast size. So you've got less time to try and care about more people.
It's amazing. It's amazing that like there's too many characters, even from like the first like 10-15 minutes where Diane, where Anna meets Ving Rhames' character, and then they meet 3 more people, which is still already more than the 4 that we had in the original.
I mean, it's
then they
technically
meet
6 because one of them's pregnant.
That's true.
And you know what that pregnancy's gonna lead to?
Oh my god.
Zombie baby! And then it's gonna be a CG baby that goes, wah! And then they shoot it with a gun.
Oh my god. Such boring scenes that just don't mean anything. It's just like, as you summed it up right there. Wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be cool, I guess?
Wouldn't be awesome, you know, man? Because, like, it's meaningless, you know?
Which is not to say that the original doesn't have little moments of, like, you can tell they were just having a bit of fun. Like, especially, like, in the end looting scene, they're obviously just doing whatever they want. Like, and the zombie that gets killed by the helicopter really early on in the original. Like, they're having some fun.
As part of a foreshadowing for the original ending. I'm not sure.
Oh, right, yeah. No, I just thought of that. Well, no, I didn't think of that, but you saying that.
If you're unfamiliar with the original plan, the plan was that the 2 remaining characters were actually going to kill themselves. And one of them was going to shoot themselves in the head, and the other, who was operating the helicopter, was going to stand up and let the helicopter blade decapitate herself. And it was decided, after a first test screening, that was bad. And also Romero felt that, like, that would be thematically really lame as well, to, like, have no sense of hope and that we can't learn from our mistakes would be lame.
Yeah. It's almost like that was a smart movie, or at least a smarter movie. A movie with some thought going into it.
I feel like I should mention here, because we're ragging a lot on, like, the shitty teen nihilism. And I think it's appropriate because the writer of Dawn of the Dead 2004 was a very shitty, lame teen nihilistic guy for a long time called James Gunn.
Yeah, I was really sad because that's obviously something that I only noticed this time watching. I never saw that before. So when I saw James Gunn's name there, I was like, "Whoa, hello."
This is why a lot of people who've known James Gunn for a long time were so excited and so happy with Guardians of the Galaxy when it came out, because that film is absolutely as much like he is Peter, and both of the Guardians of the Galaxy films are as much James Gunn talking about what a dickhead he was for most of his career, and the ways that he has grown up and learned to be a much more compassionate and better and more creative person as a result of growing out of this shit.
Yes, that's one positive.
And, he worked for Troma for years. Like, he was all about this bullshit.
Oh my god. It's good to see that. Well, there's hope. There's not hope in the movie, but there's hope in its credits. There you go. So was there anything else you wanted to say about James Gunn? Or?
Oh, that's my main point, of course. I mean, for those who aren't particularly aware of Hollywood goings-on, it's because of James Gunn being like this for a long time, it also meant that his Twitter account used to say lots of shitty things. And he deleted a lot of those tweets, and he's openly acknowledged, I used to say these sorts of things and I don't believe them anymore. But a bunch of alt-right people, operating entirely in bad faith, then gathered up a bunch of screen caps of them and mailed them in a mass campaign to a bunch of Disney executives to demand that they fire James Gunn, even though he'd talked about this with them before and they knew this was a thing and that he's not that person anymore. But faced with that astroturfing, they still caved into it anyway. And so Disney has lost a good director. The Marvel franchise has lost a good director. And have you heard what film project James Gunn has recently been hired to script and potentially direct, Matt?
Yes, Suicide Squad 2, I believe, is the movie, yes.
And if there's ever a film which can maintain these themes of redemption and growth, and potentially become something way funnier and creative in the process, there we go.
I hope the best for him. It's an annoying situation, and while there is a silver lining that he's got a new He's got more work to do.
He's got more comics to save.
He can try and save the DC universe, I suppose.
Yeah, like just have Annabella do the main ones and him do the spin-offs. That should be the approach they should take. Quite seriously.
Hopefully.
Did I say Annabella? I meant... Why do I always forget her name? Patty Jenkins.
Ah, Patty Jenkins. She's pretty good.
Annabella's the Love Witch director.
I wouldn't mind seeing... I did not like the Love Witch as much as you did, but I would still like to see her do a DC.
Oh, man. See,
I don't know what she'd do, but it'd be something good.
I mean, she'd want to do like a 60s Adam West Batman style thing. Probably.
Where Batman's actually insane and it's not the 1960s. He just thinks that it is.
Possibly.
And he's just beating up regular people instead of criminals. But yeah, if I could come back to like the characters, there's the fact there's just so many in the remake.
Mm-hmm.
One of my, I say favorite, I don't mean as in like it's good. I just mean like thinking about the movie. This is one of the things I often come to and I laugh at it. Is the literal dump truck full of new characters to kill.
Yes.
That shows up.
But hey, look, it's got Diane from the original driving it. Remember her?
Oh my god.
And then she gets in a gunfight with the guy who's hiding the pregnant zombie woman. My favorite part about this dump truck full of new characters is it has one of my favorite examples of the lazy, shitty edginess that this film has, which is one of the people... Actually, two of the people have already been bitten and are going to become zombies. And one of them is a white man who is used then as the central point of a brief discussion into the ethics of euthanasia, which is handled with all the depth and grace that you would expect from this film. And the other one is an overweight old woman who exists entirely so you can go, dude, fat old women as zombies is gross. Glad they shot her in the head. It's painfully eye-rolling.
Yeah, it's amazing that they try and there's like... It goes through the very basic tropes of they're bitten, we have to kill them, but oh no, they have a family. Like it's so simple and so like cliche, and it's amazing to me that so much time in this movie is spent with very basic things, whether it is that trope of do we kill the person who's been bitten? Even before then, they have the do we let people into our mole? You know, there's a whole section throughout the movie where they're trying to just understand why it's like how the bites work. Where they're like, is this how it works? Is that how it works? Like the movie is very concerned with those kinds of...
That sort of thing's interesting to me as well, because a point I was going to make about the opening as well is I think it almost feels like it's from a different film, or is like a trailer that was shot and then ignored in the actual scripting of the final product. Because in that, Anna very clearly sees several cases of people being bitten and turning into zombies, but it's only the bite that she sees throughout the main body of the film that actually makes her make this connection.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of this, something that I think is lame is Anna has this flirty relationship with one of the straight white guys in the group, and that would be fine, I guess, except that she's just seen her husband and her child die before the credits began, which she's only given like one scene of a couple of... This interrupted grieving is all she gets for it. And you could actually do something with this where, like, she forms a form of relationship with this man, which isn't strictly romantic, but since this guy is someone who has to sacrifice himself to let the group survive at the end, you could use this to be that she forms a relationship with this man, but in the final moments, she's able to let him go and also at the same time move on from the death of her actual husband. But the film doesn't know how to achieve anything this nuanced, and so it simply doesn't. But you can see that there's these pieces here that a better filmmaker would be able to do something with. But again, it's not, so it really does feel like everything that happened before the credits is this proof of concept to sell you on the movie you're about to see, but isn't actually canon.
Yeah, what you described there is an arc for a character. And this movie doesn't have time for that.
She was crying and got interrupted in crying, and then she shot things in the head and said one-liners.
There's like a moment when another annoying character is being annoying, and that's his character. And he says, "If I turn into a zombie, please shoot me in the head." And then he turns into a zombie, and she shoots him in the head.
Yeah,
And I
set
think
up and payoff. That's good
that's
filmmaking.
that's as intelligent as this film can get. I'm actually surprised they remembered. To be honest, that's well done. But no, it struck me that this movie is so hung up on the very basic things of zombie tropes and on like the basic things of how they just like what they're doing in the moment. Like, what are we going to do now? What do we do with these people coming into the mall? What do we do there? While every scene in the original kind of had like a secondary reason.
Yeah,
like, I remember
it does multiple things at once.
Yeah, which is a very common Zack Snyder critique I think we've had, and it's very clear here, just as it is in everything else.
Yeah, well, we've alluded to it before and we've thrown shit on the man, but here we're seeing it in practice, in full effect.
There's some scenes with Mekhi Phifer, who we've seen recently in They Live, and Ving Rhames, where they basically say their character motivations straight up. Like, they say exactly how they're feeling, who they are, and what they want. And it's scenes like that where I realize this is a guy who can only do one thing per scene, and it's usually a very basic thing. While with the original, I think especially like with the action scenes, it was always able to have a scene, even with the action scenes, which sometimes in a lot of movies, even good ones, can often just be something exciting and engaging. Yeah, but it always used to show something. Like, for instance, where are my notes here? Where I was able to, like, it was able to show that Flyboy, that was a helicopter pilot, I believe his name was Steven.
Steve.
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 He was so great.
Just like the resting scowl he has the entire film. Like,
he's an unhappy man.
He is not a guy you want to hang out with, and he's in a relationship with Diane, and he even proposes to her at one point. But when she turns him down, that's an interesting thing I might touch on at some point. But for now, just she turns him down, and that alone should be pretty obvious because this guy's just insufferable.
Yeah, he's such a sourpuss, like, all the time. But like, there's a really, really funny scene where he punches a zombie or like attacks it with like a hammer or something,
yes.
And it's like this flying like attack where he falls over while doing it, and it's really funny. Like, at first, all you notice is how hilarious it is, but it actually is showing something to us. It's showing to us that he is not competent in these action situations. We also see that when he's trying to shoot a zombie in like, I'm not quite sure what it's like, this industrial room, and he can't see the zombie, and he's firing off the pistol shots. He's missing them all, and he's getting into a lot of trouble with just this one zombie.
Yeah, and it's all because he acted too soon and moved where he wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, and it shows something about his character, and is something that is you see with him throughout the whole movie, just like we see with the cops. We see that both of them are very competent at first, they're very calm, and that's why they get through the initial situation that they have at the apartment building. You know, we're seeing bits about their character and seeing things about their character while you're doing the action scene. Like, we're able to do multiple things at once. Yes. It's so good. That kind of adds to the way the original is just able to do things so much more efficiently and so much more elegantly than the remake is.
While also running longer.
Yes. It's
a more efficient film while being longer.
It gets so much more done. Because we talked a little about the start. We talked most about the start of the remake. But I said quickly that I love the original start. Like, even just that. Like, we talked about the scene with the news station and also the scene with the apartment building. But for me, that news station is so perfect. Like, it's such a perfect, like, 10-15 minutes of runtime, which somehow manages to...
It doesn't feel its length.
It does not feel its length at all. And what I love about it is that it establishes a sense of, like, urgency. And, like, there's problems going on, but nothing is actually happening that's violent. Like...
and a TV station as that location has, by virtue of being broadcast, the visual implication that you can accept this as being a metaphor for the world at large. or at least America at large. That if the TV is like this, and it's communicating this sort of frenzy, how much more frenzied is everything else out there going to be?
And it's also even shows that right at the start it gets across that idea that humanity is suffering because we're turning against each other. They're all shouting at each other, they're angry at each other, they're arguing, debating. The people who should be doing their jobs are not. The people who should be pulling together are not. There's selfishness. There's desertion. We see that in the cops. We see that in the people deserting the place. It's able to get across this idea that this whole country or just humanity or society in general is collapsing. It doesn't have to show us a single zombie. And I think it's so good it's able to do that. And if you compare that to the remake, the way that its first scenes are incredibly boring, they remind me a lot about how a lot of slasher films start, where it feels like it's trying to establish characters to us, but it doesn't really want to. It's just something that it feels like it has to do.
Like I said, it's going through, and I feel it's competent in doing what it's doing, but then it just abandons all pretense once that music kicks in.
And I feel like even before that, even though you're right, that's when the whole, even the pretense of it is gone. But I think you can tell, even though it's constantly done, it's like a bored competence.
It has to do a shower sex scene to pass the time.
Yeah, and it's and I feel like with the remake, right from the start, it shows this difference between the remake and the original. Where the original has this great pacing that it's able to be. It's able to keep this sense of urgency going along while not being frenetic. It's always this gradual sense and creeping sense of dread and urgency. While with the remake, it's in spurts and starts. There's a really quiet, slow scene right at the start where nothing is wrong, and then everything just breaks loose. Everything just explodes. Yeah.
And that's how the movie works. Some of that hell breaking loose, in particular the helicopter shot, I think is a really nice shot. But again, that it's using a hammer to bash you over the head rather than making you think. When you're seeing these the TV station scene in Romero's, your brain goes, aha, things are going chaotic and the world's possibly ending. Whereas in Dawn of the Dead, you see a helicopter shot of a car crash leading to an explosion, followed immediately by opening credits where Johnny Cash's The Man Comes to Town, a song about the end of the world, is playing. And so, did you know that the world might be ending, guys? And all the music choices by Zack Snyder are very on the nose.
Oh, yeah.
Not only is there Disturbed's Down with the Sickness, there's 2 instances of it because they also use the Richard Cheese cover. And even the way that the music is used, where the music, there's scenes where shopping mall music plays in the Zack Snyder film, usually to create a dissonance between, hey, we just had a tense action scene, now haha, we're having this quiet moment, but the music's still playing. Whereas the music is used in Romero's more to highlight the banality and ennui of consumerism.
Yeah.
And ultimately then moves into things like the gonk, more to realize when it's just you've seen how meaningless and dehumanizing all these things are. Now that you realize this is a joke, we're going to really help to remind you, this is bizarre and this is something that is in a way worth laughing at. There's
a lot of humor in the original. It's a little
you want to know what made me laugh the hardest this time?
What?
Because there's all the classic ones that people laugh at, the ways that the looters just start throwing literal cream pies in zombies' faces, or the man who won't stop trying to get his blood pressure checked even though it kills him. What got me this time is just at the bottom of the frame in one of the wide shots, one of the gang members does the worst fucking thrust kick I have ever seen in a zombie, and the zombie no-sells it.
It's great how the movie is able to have fun. The original, it's able to do all this and also have this sense of just and you see this in the music as well. There's just it's often when it wants to be menacing, it gets more discordant. But when it's not wanting to be menacing, the music is actually it's nice. It's kind of jovial. It's just
there's some banging prog rock going on in that soundtrack at points.
Yeah, and it struck me how the remake was just much more bog standard, and it felt like they were playing more horror beats in the remake in general. Like they wanted to play up like it's a horror movie, just like how the start feels like how a basic slasher movie start. It goes through horror beats both in the music and in just how the scenes are constructed. While in Dawn of the Dead, it actually does something a little bit different. Like it actually just the way the scenes are shot just are so much more interesting, and like it's it's just so much better.
Yeah.
So I kind of lost my way there a little bit. But it always
okay.
comes back.
I have something which can guide you. 59
Sure.
minutes 20 seconds into George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, the greatest
Sure.
line of all time occurs. Do you want to abort it? It's not too late, and I know how. But you're a cop, mate. You're a cop. Why are you like?
It's such that scene's just like whoa, hello.
Yeah, that is the closest the film really comes to like facing the camera and saying, perhaps you should think about contemporary issues.
I love and this kind of goes to, both with the comedy, but also just like something else I want to talk about. Where one of the funny things, obviously, is the gun zombie, the one who grabs the gun early on, and
Chekhov's gun zombie.
Yes,
set up, reminded, and paid off.
And that was just a little thing. That's something that would be a major. Like we were talking about how like amazing it was. They remembered that guy said "shoot me in the head," and then she does shoot him in the head. That for the remake would be amazing. But for this original, this is just some side thing that they were able to set up and pay off.
Yeah,
with
there's a bunch of this like the first time they navigate through the department store, which is one of their main thoroughfares. They do a lot of shots of establishing there's mannequins there, and you go, oh, look, it's mannequins. It's a department store, and those aren't zombies. And they walk past the mannequins another time, and then on the third time, without really glancing at the mannequins, as they're moving through that spot, there is a zombie next to the mannequins that just grabs one of them.
Yeah.
And there's no scare cord, there's no dramatic zoom-ins on the camera, it just happens. And like you have that moment where your brain's just thinking, hey, is that a zombie? Oh shit, that's a zombie attacking. And that's one of the beautiful things about the way the zombies are utilized in Romero's, is not just this is some good setup, reminder, payoff, but the zombies often have very little Foley attached to them, and quite often have very little moaning until they're in a big group. So a lot of the time, like, you don't get like type things. It's just you're walking along, and then out of nowhere, just this hand will grab you and try to eat you, and it's just oh, that's there, because you didn't have all these obnoxious telltales to prep your body to think, okay, a big scare's coming. It's just your brain has to realize, oh crap, a bad thing is happening based on visual stimuli alone, which is neat because film is a visual medium.
Yeah, and like the way like so many of the zombie encounters and the times that we see zombies, they're not a threat, even if they can physically walk or are in grabbing distance. They're often just so easily shrugged off, and it's usually when the characters start making mistakes or they become in some way inattentive is when the zombies start to get them. And I really like that idea, the way that my gun's just gone completely blank again. I hate when that happens. I'm sorry. But because I was talking about with the gun zombie, I like how the zombies themselves kind of become characters, in that we see them, or we start to see the same ones over and over again. They even have their own little segments and parts to them. You know, I feel like what's interesting is that the Dawn of the Dead, the original, has just such a horrible makeup for the zombies, but in some ways it actually helps because it makes them almost humanizes them a little bit. Like it's okay to look at them.
Yeah, well, it makes you think that much more about what you have to lose.
Yeah. While with obviously with Dawn of the Dead, where it's much better special effects, they just look like horrible monsters. You don't want to look at them just because they're like there's blood hanging off them and they're like drooling.
They're a thing that it'd be awesome if you shot with your gun, or cut with your chainsaw sticking out the side of the car.
I love this. Oh yeah, sorry.
I want to mention the car scene because there is this neat shot where you're at night with this stark lighting, and then there's like a billion bodies just clawing out with their hands at the bus, and it's all, hey, that's a neat visual. And then you realize every Zack Snyder movie has a scene where a large bunch of extras are clawing at a person in the middle.
Oh my god, that's true. They even had Superman do that, right?
Man of Steel does it. Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice does it with slightly different framing. I'm pretty sure Watchmen does it, but I don't feel like watching the 5 million hours that goes for again to check. 300 maybe doesn't, but I think like the orgies in Xerxes' tent totally count.
Well, I mean, like, the basic idea of that one obviously is like there's a small amount of them and they're kind of getting surrounded, not surrounded, but like they're being like attacked by a horde. So kind of like the same kind of thing is kind of happening where there's a horde of people trying to attack a very small number of heroes.
I will mention there, though, that you can totally understand how Snyder got attached to 300 from this point.
True.
Because,
Yep.
like, all the way I'm talking and the tone I'm using to describe the, yeah, man, that'd be sick and that'd be awesome is so simplistic and so puerile. But that's really what makes 300 work so well, is that it goes for that. And at work, that's what helps make that film work in some ways as a criticism of Frank Miller's comic, where the comic is undoubtedly a right-wing propaganda piece, but Snyder's takes it so far that it does come off as highlighting just how dumb that is.
I feel like the success or failure, or just in general just how fun a Zack Snyder movie can be to watch, is somewhat not really down to him, just like down to what he's attached to.
Oh yeah, he's absolutely a director who's made better by having the right people. Like, this film is still, I would say, one of his better ones, just because even shitbloke James Gunn is still a way better writer than, like, the guy he had with Sucker Punch, whose name I can't remember. Or even worse, Zack Snyder himself being lead writer.
Oh.
You like 3.5 hour movies? No, you hated Ben-Hur.
I feel like the reason why Zack Snyder would have such long movies is just because when you only do one thing at once, you got to put a lot of scenes in.
You sure do. Especially if it's got to have action scenes as well.
I think the idea that this is one of his better movies, this remake, is probably I'd probably be able to realize that more if I wasn't such a big fan of the original Dawn of the Dead. Like, it's just so easy to look at.
You just have to look at the list of his films and go, yeah. It's garbage, but it's still better.
I guess I just have such stronger feelings, though. Like, I don't really care about Sucker Punch or 300, or I like Superman, but I wouldn't call myself a massive fan of him. So the fact that they're not very good movies doesn't really affect me too much, other than just saying, wow, it was a bad movie, and then I move on. But Dawn of the Dead is a real favorite of mine. I think probably because, like, it was one of the first movies where I probably did understand symbolism. It was kind of like, or just like, I understood there's like a way you can make a movie that says more things than that is just what is happening at the time, on the surface. Probably because it is, like, as much as we talk about how much more intelligent it is than the remake, I understand that, like, the thematic stuff in the original is pretty simple. So it probably helped me feel very smart as a little kid who was like, hey, hello.
And
I
that's
understand
fine.
this.
Like, this film is fairly nuanced and is good, and it is a testament to its quality that, even when you were younger, you were able to understand what it was saying.
Yeah. It's a shame that nowadays, when people think of zombie films, they'll definitely think of the remake first. And I still see the remake. I said I haven't seen any reviews for it, but I have seen what other people think of it, and like just regular people. And it's a pretty well loved movie, to be honest, from what I can see. The remake from just regular people, just like, oh yeah, that was fun. That was like,
yeah, and like
exciting.
I said, if you are after a certain sort of experience, it will achieve that.
Yeah.
But that sort of experience sucks and is lame.
Unlike us, we like good movies, like George Romero's.
Well, I like good movies. You don't like good
Oh,
movies. You keep hating all
I
the good movies, the good, slow, boring movies I show you.
that is we've already talked about. I guess I would like to point that out again, just because I think that is what is one of the things that is just so good about Dawn of the Dead is that it's able to get across these themes so efficiently that the pacing of the movie, it's a very fast 2 hours. Even though the scenes are rarely frenetic,
It's
there's
close to
not
two and a half, even.
yeah, that's it's a long movie and it's never as I say never a frenetic movie. Even in the action scenes, they're usually pretty slow, but it never feels that. It always feels like it's going somewhere. You always feel engaged.
Yeah.
And
I watched this
yeah,
after what should be the more better and newer, flashier one, and I was still way more engaged with what was happening in George Romero's. You got
even
anything else
just
you'd like to add? Because I think we've gotten a fairly good coverage of these films right here.
yeah, like there's always going to be other things to talk about because there are like so many good things about Dawn of the Dead, the original, and so many bad things about the remake. But yeah, I think we've gotten across the major points, and it really does boil down to one film has some intelligence behind it, and the other film is a zombie that has zero thought or
The other
theme or
film
heart.
thinks it's being clever, but by being so simplistic.
Yeah, and I hate it, but I love the original, so that's good.
That's cool. Tune in next week where we're gonna do some vampire movies.
Ooh.
Yo.
Bye, everyone.